Everybody get up, no need to cram now. We got a real jam going down, going down, going down, going down, going down, going down. Welcome to the IntelliJAMS. Here's your chance.
Alex, what's going on, man?
How
you know, living. Ready to jam.
Amazing. I'm psyched to jam. What do you want to jam on today?
Okay, so I want to jam. We've been putting some marketing material together. Some exciting stuff is about to happen. And we've been starting to talk about this concept of the profit growth flywheel. And
okay.
I want to jam on that.
Amazing. Tell me a little bit about like what is the profit growth flywheel before so I have some context while we get into it.
Okay, so the profit growth flywheel, I feel like a lot of people when they go to do experiments is they get like so focused on the actual experiment itself that they forget that there is like a cyclical nature to this.
Mm-hmm.
So someone will put an experiment together and be like, oh, that experiment was a win or a loss, on to the next experiment. But what we're trying to communicate with this flywheel is that every time you go to do something, it is cyclical in nature. So like we've been talking about it as kind of like 3 E's, where you have explore, experiment, and then extend, where I want to get a lay of the land. I want to be able to see what's going on kind of like across the business to form a hypothesis. That hypothesis can feed into a specific experiment. But then once that experiment concludes, what am I going to do with it? And then how am I going to take what I did to then go explore and understand the new business that I've created afterwards?
Dude, I think that like one thing, and I've heard Drew talk about this, but one thing that is so core to this framework is, and the question that you posed is, am I testing the right things? Am I experimenting on the most valuable areas? And that's a daunting question, and it might feel really high stakes about what should I go test next. And that's one of the most common questions that we get. And I think that the reason it's important to open the aperture here to this explore step before we go to experimentation is we have limited capacity. We have limited amount of time to run these types of tests. So like, I want to make sure that we're running the most high value thing, the most important thing, solving the biggest opportunities in the business as possible. So how do you know what are the biggest opportunities in the business as possible? Well, you have a lot of data at your disposal. And so let's explore that data, find those opportunities that we can go after, and let that be the hypothesis that we can then inform the decision to go run an experiment. So yeah, I mean, that to me feels really core. Exploration feels really core to good experimentation.
Yeah. And like, before we jump into like going into the experiment side, like on explore, 2 things you said, like finding the biggest lever that you can pull in your business, but also finding something that's based in the realities of your business, right? Like you and I have jammed a bunch on like everyone out there will have a best practice for you. But like when you have a really solid understanding of what's going on across your business, you can actually base that experiment in the realities of what is going on for you. And you said like, hey, expand the aperture of this. Yes, like I think a lot of times with experiments or like kind of like testing or CRO, we get so hyper fixated on like what can I change on the page? But what we're saying in this explore is it go beyond the page. Like go figure out what's going on across the business and figure out where you can experiment with a business decision, not necessarily just like a change to a page.
I love that. I think that understanding the business dynamics is something that requires a lot of intrinsic understanding of the business. I think, Alex, you shared a job posting that it just resonated with me so much that it was about a finance role, or maybe you can share what that job posting was and how it was framed, if you remember.
Yeah. You talk about the jobs posted to Twitter, and I was like, this is really interesting. Yeah. So basically, it was a brand that was looking to hire both a finance person and an operations person. And I thought it was just like so interesting to me because one's basically like job to be done was like find margin gains wherever you can. As the operator of this business and like our lead operations person, go find where you can better our margins. And then on the finance side, it was like, hey, we need someone who's going to be basically like that explore person who is going to look at everything that's going on across the business and see if like we can find places to go put like our operational excellence or our operations person to.
Yeah. I mean, I think that like, again, thinking beyond the page and going full stack about the business, there's all the way to top of funnel and like what campaigns and what ads and how much am I spending on marketing and efficiency there. There's the site, there's LTV and extracting value from your existing customer base. There's your supply chain economics. There's so many things, does reducing SKU count, you could even test that, for example. Again, this is just off the cuff here, but if you have this hypothesis that maybe you can create a lot of operational efficiency by cutting your SKU count by 90% from like maybe 10,000 SKUs to 1,000 SKUs, maybe before you go do that, you can A/B test what would a version of your site and what would a version of your brand look like if you only sold 1,000 SKUs instead of 10,000 SKUs. And it turns out that my sales are just as good, then that's a huge operational efficiency that you can then leverage. Okay, let's sell through those 9,000 other SKUs and really focus our supply chain and our on those 1,000 SKUs that really make up the business.
1,000%. And if we don't widen the aperture and like have like an actual explore phase inside of this flywheel, then you miss all of those. And like, again, I think like having finance or operations be a part of this flywheel is super important, because like if you don't have kind of like buy-in from everyone, then you end up too narrowly defined, and you'll probably find, like, I'm not saying you can't find wins doing it the old way. You absolutely will find wins. It's just like you probably stacking ones on top of each other rather than finding like a big 10x improvement.
Yeah. And I think that it's important to, again, as we zoom out, so one part of this conversation is beyond the page, that it's profit growth. It's not just like, let me do CRO here and let's go into the entire scope of the business. The other thing that I think it's, again, not important not to lose sight of is this concept of the flywheel, and that this is a very cyclical nature thing where there's exploration. I want to find big opportunities. I'm going to go experiment on them, maybe execute my findings or extend them, to use your term, whether that's like in the site or into your business. And then you immediately then want to go see, okay, did the learnings that I just implemented, this extension, is that actually having the impact that I expected it to have? Oh no, maybe there was some unintended side like consequence here that I didn't anticipate. And so that's then where the exploration is really important, to be able to measure and monitor the outcomes, not just what happened in experimentation mode, but beyond.
Exactly. And like, again, I think from like a flywheel perspective, we can skip over experiment. Like you and I have jammed on experiment like
100%,
a gajillion times. But like what you were saying there, like if we go into extend, like, hey, I have seen the results of my experiment and I want to go do something with that. And I think like that will change the dynamics of the business as we go back into the explore phase. And I think one thing for me on the extend side is, if you have, again, you formed a great hypothesis, you are now experimenting with that hypothesis. Maybe it didn't turn out exactly as you intended, but you want to go extend this not to the whole business. But maybe it's like, hey, when I did this, it actually was super effective in this ad channel. Maybe I'm just going to create like experiences off of personalized links and like send people in it that way. Or, hey, it was actually super effective for a customer who makes more than 3 purchases. Like, hey, this is probably a returning customer experience. Like being able to extend that into like segmented areas of the business is also interesting. So I'm just saying that so it doesn't have to be this like wide sweeping change that we then need to like evaluate the entire change across the business. It could be that like we actually extended the learnings to a specific spot, and hey, now we can explore inside of, like, we can also explore inside of that, not just explore kind of everything as a whole.
100%. I think that if people, I mean, I think that this is one of the approaches that we take when we work with brands, and our success team and our advisory services team is like, hey, there's like constantly stuff to be learned and then executed on and continue learning. I think that, as humans, we are always striving for improvement and continued learning. And I'm like, love this framing of it, because it sort of embodies our own human nature into our businesses.